Hey everybody, Rob Orgel with Silencer Syndicate. Now I know most of you are semi-familiar with my background, being that I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps as an infantry rifleman. Then I became a private military contractor, yada, yada, yada. Watch that video if you're interested. But along the path of my Marine Corps career, especially as an instructor, I got to meet some very interesting people. And here with me today is Derek. He and I met as combat instructors, and I'll let him give his introduction. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Derek.
So my name is Derek Debus. I'm the Director of Military Veterans and Firearms Law at Stone Rose Law. Prior to becoming a lawyer, I was a professional firearms instructor, and before that, I was a Marine infantryman and a combat instructor with Rob at the School of Infantry West.
So we kind of know each other.
Yeah, we've known each other for about, oh man, about 10 years now?
Over 10 years. It's been over 10 years.
Goodness, where does the time go?
Yes. So, having said that, Derek is our subject matter expert in firearms and NFA items. So, whenever I have questions, I call Derek and say, hey, this is my understanding. Tell me if I'm right. And Derek, we've had a lot of great conversations over things that I think people should know, many of the things people don't know, and a lot of the information that they might rely on a lesser source to produce that information. So, first, if people wanted to find you because I asked a question that was close to what they wanted to know, but not exactly what they want to know, how would they find you?
Easiest way is online. Website is stoneroselaw.com. On there, you can put in a contact form or you can find our number and call us directly. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
So their contact information will be found in the description box below. So if you want to verify that information or copy paste that, I'll make that easy on you because I think he's an excellent resource of information. And many a times he's answered questions for me and some of my clients just out of the kindness of his heart to help a community stay out of trouble. Having said that stay out of trouble whole thing, what do you do when the ATF knocks on your door?
Goodness. So what you do with the ATF knocks on your door is the same thing you do anytime a police officer knocks on your door. Don't talk to him. Don't open the door. And if you have to, say, hey, I don't want to talk to you. Can I have your card? I want to talk to my attorney first. Don't engage. You don't need to let them into your house. You don't need to go out and talk to them on the porch. You don't even need to honestly even address that they're there. If they have a warrant, they don't need your permission one way or the other. So if ATF knocks on your door, don't let them in.
I heard some other great opinions, and that was, some people would say not answering the door, period, is great because if they had a warrant, they would have to announce that they have a warrant because otherwise they're just a telemarketer who showed up in person, essentially, and I don't answer those calls. So the same thing, I can see on my Ring app or whatever app people might be using and see that this is a uniformed or, lately less uniformed person who I don't know. So you could answer and therefore not confirm or deny that you're home and just, who is it? If you lie to law enforcement, that's illegal. So if you said I'm at the grocery store and you're not, that's a bad idea, which is why often lawyers say stuff like say less because whatever you say can and will be all that good stuff that we already all know about. But it's sometimes these little things that we forget, that I only had 2 beers when the truth is you had 3. Like there's so many silly little things that it's good to stay away from, which is why many lawyers would give you the advice of.
Yeah, so I think the Ring camera is kind of a great example. Those have their own issues in terms of criminal defense and data protection and privacy, but ultimately the cases that I get the best results on are where my clients say, hey, I don't want to talk to you, leave a card, I'll have my lawyer call you. I get the card, I call the agent up, I say what's going on, we work it out, and everyone's happy. But if they have a warrant, they're coming in regardless. So you don't need to worry about that. And if they don't have a warrant, there's nothing you need to talk to them about.
There's another, speaking of warrant, great thing that I saw someone speak to, and then I had the experience to kind of go through this with a lawyer in an active situation. And that was the warrant says what you can, hey, you stole my car. The policeman can come to your house and say, Rob said you stole his car. Therefore, in our eyes, you stole Rob's car. And they have a warrant. So they say, open the garage. And you open the garage because the warrant says to look for a car. And then they say, will you open your safe, please? They might say it a little differently, like open this safe, right? And you say, well, the warrant says car. The car doesn't fit in that gun safe. So this is outside the confines of, so I will comply to the confines of the warrant, but nothing more.
Absolutely. The warrants have to be particularized, which means that if you're looking for a car, you're not opening a shoebox under the bed because there's no way a car is going to fit in there. That being said, what I always say is the way to resist police officers is in court. You don't, if the warrant is for the car, they ask to see the garage and they want you to open up a safe that's not going to fit a car, you don't have to open it up. Now, if they're going to violate the law and crack the safe and all that stuff, hey, step back and let them. We'll figure it out later. Don't resist police officers with physical force. But you're absolutely correct. The warrant has, the four corners of that document governs what the warrant can and can't search for. Now, the difference, though, and where things get a little tricky, is the search warrant will allow them to look for evidence of the crime in places where that evidence is likely to be. So let's say they're looking for a gun. Well, in that case, they can search the house and they can search anything in the house that could hold a gun. Whereas if they're looking in your example for a car, even if they have a warrant to search the house for the car, they're going to be able to open up containers and safes and boxes like that. Does that make sense?
100%. And I think that caveats perfectly into what I think you might agree with me that people get in trouble for is the warrant says, I'm looking for this stolen iPhone. And along the way, they find a homemade suppressor.
Yeah, yeah. So if the officer stumbles across evidence of another crime while they're lawfully executing their warrant pursuant to the terms of that warrant, that's fair game. One example that we kind of discussed even back when I was in law school was, okay, police officers can chase a fleeing misdemeanor or felon, right?
Exigent circumstances is what you're.
Right.
Okay.
So police officers actively chasing a guy because, I don't know, maybe he had a DUI or he ran a stoplight or some minor crime. He sees that they see him go into a house. They follow him into the house. They arrest him. And when they look up, they see a bunch of lines and baggies of Coke on the table. Well, it doesn't matter that it's not the misdemeanor guy's house. It doesn't matter that they didn't have a warrant to be there. They had exigent circumstances to pursue that fleeing felon or that fleeing criminal. And because they were lawfully where they were allowed to be due to those exigent circumstances, anything they see in plain view is fair game.
What's so interesting, unfortunately, is just 2 days ago, I was on a coyote hunt with Damien. We put down a bobcat and a coyote, but here nor there. On that trip, one of my clients, a female, who very nice girl, had a SWAT team enter her house, rifles up and dogs, because someone was exactly your saying, fleeing, and he took a hostage next door,
Oh,
and they
goodness.
decided we need to be in charge of this house for now. So they entered her home, and she blew up my phone with my rights. I feel so violated, and it's like, that's permission to violate your rights is exigent circumstances. There's an active situation where we need to keep other people safe. I'm not saying I'm left or right of this, in agreements or disagreements, but in this circumstance, they have permission to violate your rights because they're in hot pursuit of someone who could be problematic to other people. And so of course, she didn't have anything she wasn't supposed to. But the first question they asked her is, any firearms in the house? And I think she said no, and I believe she does not have firearms, because if she had inherently said no because there wasn't one on her, she'd be lying to law enforcement. And if they saw a rifle next to her bed, then that could be a crime in itself.
Absolutely.
Which is why the advice you gave earlier is say less.
Say less. You don't ever need to answer a law enforcement officer's questions.
Even though it might feel
Ever.
like it.
Even though it might feel like it. And it is the most awkward thing in the world when you get pulled over and the officer says, do you know how fast you were going? And you say, officer, I'm not going to discuss my day. It's awkward. It's awkward for me as a criminal defense attorney, but it's what you got to do. Because anytime you talk to a police officer, they are potentially looking to gather evidence against you and twist or modify anything you say to place it in a light that is least favorable to you.
I find that is a social game that's being played that they're well trained at doing. In other words, when you're pulled over and they say, what's the hurry? People will give an excuse. Just like I say, hey, were you running late today? People will say, oh no, but I was up late last night. People do that because they're being social and they're relating to you. So when a police officer pulls you over and he says, what's the hurry? You innately will say like, well, I didn't want to be late to a, oh, so you knowingly and willingly broke the law? Because that's the game you're playing. It's a very unfair game that's happening here. And we're not trained at having that conversation. So I think you and I have had great conversation over like, well, okay, you're the lawyer. What would you say, Derek? I can't say the same things. And we've come to some really good conclusions on what is appropriate to say, but that it feels socially awkward by design.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Very good takeaways. Now, I want to add a caveat to this whole concept of the ATF knocking on your door. Well, the guy at the gun store told me that since I have a silencer, I have to let him in.
If the guy at the gun store knew what he was talking about when it comes to the law, he'd be a lawyer, not a gun salesman. That is probably one of the most pervasive misunderstandings about the NFA in general. That if you simply own an NFA registered firearm, that you have given up your rights and the ATF can come in whenever they want, and that is so far from the truth. It's comical. Where I think the conflation happens is the rise of home-based FFLs or garage FFLs. Because if you have an FFL, yeah, the industry operations inspectors from the ATF can come in anytime they want to inspect your shop. And if your shop is your home, well, hey, congratulations. You have given them the opportunity to look in that home. But a private citizen that has an NFA item does not have any less Fourth Amendment protection than any other citizen. ATF does not have carte blanche to come and inspect your home, verify that you still have these things, inspect your tax stamp. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I found that misnomer, and I even found it in law enforcement communities. In fact, a group of US Marshals I was speaking with, they said, well, they get to see where you store them. And I said, well, hold on. And I think, like you said, the misunderstanding of an FFL, this is my gun store and I'm a home base, therefore my home is where I sell guns or where I do my business. And I know plenty of people who have found ways around that, that they only do business in the Connex box next to their house. They only do business on their porch. They've found ways to kind of make that a softer relationship, but you are in a relationship with the ATF if you're a gun store. So the annual inspection or the less than or more than inspection can take place on a whim, and that is a little bit of your amendments, your constitutional rights you're giving up in order to have your FFL in your home.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that same analysis, that same agreement with the ATF where, hey, I will let you do this if you let me do that, doesn't apply to suppressors or other Class 3 NFA items.
So unlike the gun store guy told me, what do we call him? The gun clerk? Gun store clerk? Armchair quarterback of the gun industry.
Yep, yep.
Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good guys out there who are giving good information, helping people, buy their new car, rifle, pistol, silencer, etc. But there's a lot of, maybe a much smaller number, but a very loud percentage of them who's telling you that you're giving up your rights by owning a silencer because he himself does not have one and therefore wants to make other people not have. Very silly stuff. But the end state is you maintain all of your rights, whether you have pre-ban machine guns, whether you have NFA items like silencers, AOWs, et cetera, et cetera. Where does it apply to us that I need to be cognizant where I did trade some of my rights? And that might have something to do with moving.
Yeah, so, the NFA, we all know, is a registry of certain classifications of firearms, weapons, and destructive devices. The ATF maintains that registry, and they're very, very happy to make sure that all of their guns and all the guns that they're registered are where they think they are. To that end, if you are temporarily transporting an AOW, a destructive device, a machine gun, or a short-barreled rifle or shotgun, you have to get permission from the ATF to temporarily transport that out of state. Now, if you are permanently moving out of state, you still have to get permission. The only difference is it's not 100% clear under the rules whether you have to get that permission to permanently relocate a suppressor across state lines. Rob and I have different views on how the regulation comes out, but what we both agree on is that best practices, if you are permanently moving an NFA item across state lines, fill out the form 5320.20 with the ATF, get permission, and do it the right way.
And to your point, there's been plenty of out-of-state hunts where I want to bring my suppressor, and you just bring your suppressor. There's weird things. There's always somebody who says, but one time I know a guy who got caught up in Illinois because of a reroute of a flight, and he got in trouble. All kinds of weird stuff happens in the world, and you're not flying the plane. You're not in control of where it's going to land. But by and large, the rule is if you're going to a state where suppressors are allowed, coming from a state where suppressors are allowed, and your suppressor is registered, it's really no big deal for you to bring your suppressor for that week-long hunt or whatever, and then come back home.
So there's actually, it's called the Federal Safe Transit Law, which basically is exactly what you said. You start in a place where it's legal, you end in a place where it's legal, you can transit it across those states, even if it's illegal in those states. The caveat is you can't stop for more than, say, to get gas. There was a case in Pennsylvania where a guy was coming from Maine, going to Texas. His gun was legal in Maine, was legal in Texas, was not legal in Pennsylvania. He stopped in a parking lot to take a nap for 3 hours. He did not get the protection of the Safe Transit Law.
Because that's fair.
That makes total and complete sense, just like every other federal law in the books.
And in case you're riding your tractor, we are rolling our eyes. Okay, good notes.
Yeah.
We're going to close up this video because we hit several very yummy topics. We've got a whole lot more. If you're liking this series, if you're liking this content, and you're digging the legal advice, Derek is being very kind to share his time for free so that we can educate you all for free. So do us a favor, for free and hit the like, comment, subscribe. It really goes a long way for the internet to understand that what we're doing here is useful. I appreciate the work you guys have already done for us. Please keep that up for us and make sure you like, comment, subscribe. So we'll see you in the next one. All right, guys, as always, stay safe. We'll see you in the comments.